There's three reasons, really. First, I grew up in the middle of a vast, empty wilderness and came to love those places, and I just really wanted to share them with the readers. And second, I strongly believe that the geography of the western U.S. has contributed greatly to the gun culture that has taken root throughout the country today. And then third, like Robert Frost, I think the natural world is a fabulous source of metaphors that can provide readers with deep, meaningful insight. On the first issue regarding my love for the outdoors, my dad has a degree in forestry, and he was a manager for the BLM, and his job was as overseer of a huge swaths of public land in Nevada and Eastern California while I was growing up. So whenever we went hunting or fishing, it was like taking a botany or geology course. My dad attended Catholic school and was quite proficient in Latin. So he'd see a tree and say, "Ah, a fine specimen of Populus tremuloides," or "Check out this Persea tridentate. And if you were a mule deer, you'd be in heaven right now." And so, learned all the plant names and their Latin names, etc. But it's also a matter of safety, survival, and hunter know-how to really know the environment well. I was taught at an early age to read topographical maps, and I loved poring over them and learning the terrain, all the names, the elevations of the peaks. And if you were going into the wilderness, those are essential things to know. Failure to do so, can result in death. And that brings me to the point about Western geography and how it's affected the gun culture. Just before the Civil War, many of the gun manufacturers were actually, on the verge of bankruptcy. But then the Civil War happened, and they all made a lot of money. And then with that came millions of people, mostly men and boys, and almost all of them armed, and they all surged into the West, into this region. And it was a vast, foreboding, and often deadly place. It has extremes in elevation, temperature, cold, heat, lack of water. There's dangerous animals, dangerous people, and it was nothing like the relatively flat, predictable eastern half of the country. And you'd have been a fool to have ventured into the West without a gun. And so the guns came, and they're still here today. That culture is embedded very deeply in the West, and it's my belief that it came from the West and spread to our urban cities. My final point about including the natural world in my writing is because it's a great source for delving into the bigger picture. Much of Thunder in the Mountains is about loss, tragedy, the passing of one generation to another, about time. And on the subject of time, on the East Coast, you really don't get as much of a sense of geological time as you do in the West. Out here, it's always in your face and unavoidable. You can't look at a 14,000-foot peak and think how it was thrust skyward inch by inch by inch, year by year by year, over the course of eons until it finally achieved this current grandeur. And in my home in Bishop, in high school, I could look out my window and see stands of bristlecone pines, and these are trees that are over 5,000 years old. They were saplings before the pharaohs first began building pyramids. And then when you stand on a snowfield at 10,000 feet and you see rivulets of water trickling down the slope, you can't help but think how that water is going to eventually turn into a stream, then a lake, then a river, and then empty into the ocean and start the whole cycle anew. And so every day you get a profound sense of geologic time, as well as a sense that there is something bigger afoot than just you. And it forces you to wonder what it all means. And after a while, you soon realize that your time here on Earth is simply a whisper of the wind to a bristlecone pine.